Welcome into the OBR streaming network. This is a special crossover double edition Browns 3D with the always terrific Jeff Lloyd and All Eyes on Cleveland with myself, Brad Ward. How you doing? Good to see you filing into the chat tonight for this special episode. Glad to have you here. Make sure you hit like, subscribe, atone for your sins, and hit that notification bell so you know every time we go live 5 nights a week here at the OBR streaming network. What is going on, Mr. Jeff Lloyd?
Obviously I think the excitement and the anticipation is really starting to ramp up a little bit. And this is certainly something, that probably fans and all of us who cover this team have probably gotten to miss out on the last few years, with such limited rookie classes the last few years without prominent picks. And, just getting to see these guys come into the building, and look, I'm a sucker for it. I love, I used to love equipment issue day. I absolutely love it. It's just something about, getting you new, the old look good, feel good, do good concept. These guys in there and, listen to Mason Graham. Oh, I don't want to wear lineman cleats, and like Dylan Gabriel. Oh, wait a minute. No, these are the wrong ear pads. And just like everything they go through. And like you remember you used to go get shoes when you were a kid and there was that big metal thing. Now you literally stand up on this platform and, basically they suggest, what the accurate size is, what shoe works best for you, but, this is, again, it's all stuff we really haven't gotten here as fans and people who cover this team over the last few years. And, we all know the reason why. And it's just nice, I think, that we're getting this newness. And we're also getting that one big black cloud kind of just pushed further and hopefully further away.
Stay away. Stay away. All right. Well said. Good. This is awesome little crossover we're doing here tonight. I got to let everybody know about Casey. Casey they're battening down the hatches, Jeff, for a hailstorm.
Yep.
Like damaging like hail. Like, I mean, if it could happen to somebody, it's happening to Casey Kinnaman lately. So, I mean, good Lord. So, they're they're trying to, get the cars covered up. So, I mean, we're talking hail that will do some damage. So that's no fun. So Casey's out tonight. We decided to do this crossover, which is awesome. Yeah. And he has spam poisoning. Yeah, you're right. No, he survived that. So it's on to the next thing in the Kinnaman household. All right, Jeff, I know you'd covered this on your show, but real quickly, let's throw up the numbers. All right, what's safe and what's not safe is what the fans want to know. What is safe and not safe at this point with the rookie numbers first?
Yeah, this is the thing. And, I applaud Coach Stefanski for the, hey, you've been around, we're going to give you what you want to the veterans. But again, it does feel kind of high schoolish. Look, DeAndre Carter's been here a hot minute, you know what I'm saying? And, to just give him, especially a single digit now, because that's become so coveted in the NFL. I think the newness of the single digit is probably wearing off a little bit in the NFL already.
Yeah.
But, I think for, a lot of kids coming from college, those numbers mean a lot to them. You know what I'm saying? Obviously they're really good players. They've always worn single digits. But like I said, you got a lot of people. And look, we see pictures on social media all the time about the amount of Browns gear Browns fans buy. So where are you comfortable with this right now? Like, you know what I'm saying? And these things aren't cheap. And the last thing you want is to, spend it and say from week one, oh, well, there's been a couple of changes. I think Mason Graham is okay for now. I mean, I don't know what the marriage was to Mason Graham in 55, essentially. And I'll be honest, if you ask me the jersey number 55 that he wore in college, it feels like an interior offensive lineman number. Or even if you're older like me, it's a linebacker number. 94, that's D tackle. Absolutely. And of course, we all saw the video. A lot of these guys asked for single digits. And unfortunately, coach had already made his decision. Swessinger, I'm not putting money on that. And can we please get him out of 49? I mean, 49 is a long snapper's number.
I agree, but it's his number though. And to me, I think that's one of the more safer ones. And I don't like the number either,
but he
But like,
asked for a single digit. So, you got to think, 44 is available. 44 on him. 44 is a lot prettier number for a linebacker than maybe 49 would be, I
oh,
think.
he did? Did he ask for a single digit?
There, because no, okay, this was the best part, Brad. It was him, Fannin, and Judkins all at the same time. And even when the equipment guy says to Schlesinger, he goes, "Well, you wore 49, and you got Fannin, and you got Judkins." Look, I'm going like, seriously, you were
Yeah.
49.
Yeah.
Like normally a guy
Yeah.
goes 30 overall in the draft doesn't have a bad number, but that's what happens when you go to school. 0-star recruit. You know, you get the number you get, and you kind of
Yeah.
just be quiet about it. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Judkins at
That's the
10.
walk that's the walk-on story, right? Like the
Yeah,
49. So that's why I thought he would stick with it because it's like,
but he
that's his
did ask for a
story.
different number. That's what that's the only reason. See, for me, that's a tough one.
Good point. Yeah, I didn't
And
know that.
with
So,
that, the aesthetics of Carson Schlesinger, them absolutely beautiful locks. I think we got to do better. I
yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
Judkins in 10. I'd rather just slap him in a decent running back number in the 20s or the 30s if that was the case. I mean, 10. I know guy Pacheco from the Chiefs wears it. I don't know. Again, 10. But
It's the only
hey,
guy I can think of. Yeah.
yep. Fannin at
Um,
88. This was one of two numbers he requested. He said 44, 88. So you think maybe there's some sticking there.
yeah.
Gabriel, all through his college career, wore number 8. They gave that to Pickett. So there creates an issue. I like 22 on
Yeah.
Samson, even though he wore a single digit in college. And he was fun to watch today. Finding out that Wyatt Teller from Virginia is cooking up crawfish, and you had the Baton Rouge native and Dylan Sampson just like going over, like, oh my God, there's crawfish here in Cleveland. And, so
That's
obviously got
great.
himself a taste. And, Shador, 2 to DeAndre Carter, you know, at 12, I guess it's the most logical number. And, there's certainly things you can think. It's the reverse of his father's number.
Yep.
There were
Tom
other,
Brady.
yeah, there were other things that were, put in there where he could get to the number of 12. He was what was he was 12 times 12 is 144. That's where he was drafted.
Oh,
But
wow.
if I were going to buy, I think Samson is one where you're going to be okay. I think Mason Graham's one where you're going to be okay. I think Fannon's going to be okay. Gabriel, why would you switch? I think, even if you think I'm one who thinks Pickett could be the odd guy out,
Yeah.
maybe you're just starting a new path. But I feel bad for the fans because, look, I'm not a guy who buys a lot of jerseys anymore. I think you get to a certain point, a certain age where that's just maybe not your thing anymore.
Yeah.
But obviously, I'm big on social media and I know how much people love this stuff. And for
Yeah.
what it costs, it would kind of stink to, lay out to buy a decent replica jersey, which you're talking probably a bill, 100, and then just to know that maybe you get a season out of it, maybe a season.
Fumble. What in the hell does what is that? Triskaidea decaphobia? Is that
I think
fear of a weird number?
triskaidekaphobia. I think that is the fear of like Friday the 13th. It's the fear of the number 13 is what I
Oh,
thought it was. Maybe I'm wrong though.
yeah. Okay. All right. So do you think Sanders ultimately just goes, here's a bag of cash, DeAndre, give me 2?
But he's giving up. Yeah, well, how much money though? I mean, because he's digging into the money he has before he got here. He's not making much money. It'd be different if he was the first round pick and said, "Dude, just give me the number, man. Name your price." You got to keep
I
in
don't.
mind, Shador's making, low money.
Yeah, but
So this is
are we really worried about Shador's bank account at this point? Really? I mean,
well, look, when you talk about the Sanders is the one thing, their money's real to them, and
okay.
my guess is no. My guess is no, he wouldn't pay for it. My guess
Wow.
is he would,
Okay.
you know,
All
does
right.
DeAndre Carter just say, "Hey, kid, it doesn't matter to me here. Take the jersey number,
He
whatever."
probably
But
he probably should. I mean, personally, do you think DeAndre Carter's sticking on this roster?
I think the biggest thought you have there is where do you value return?
Right.
A return guy because he is not. I don't know how he's in the mix essentially right now for legit wide receiver reps,
He
and
should he shouldn't be. Yeah.
I don't see how, and let's just go through it, right? So, Judy obviously
Yeah.
going to be here.
Yeah.
Deontay Johnson, what I call Deontay Johnson, I call him a two player. He could be here
Yeah.
2 minutes, 2 hours, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years.
Yeah.
Similar to who was the defensive tackle that was only here, was here a couple of years ago, after
Malik
he was in prison.
McDowell.
Yeah, and then obviously, unfortunately, the mental stuff started again.
Yeah,
He's that
yeah,
type of guy. It's
he
all
had a
on
good
him
year.
whether or not he wants to stick around. But then, so Deontay Johnson, and that's you put him in there with an asterisk. Obviously, Cedric Tillman is here. You think Thrash is still going to be here. Um, and then you get, so Carter could stick as the return guy. And, I think they are trying to change the rules a little bit here to get the return game back involved a little bit more.
Yeah, they
But,
moved it 5 yards, though. I
it's
mean, come
something though.
on.
I mean, it's something, I mean,
Yeah.
they're trying. I think they were just so much on trying to keep everybody safe that it just became to the point where it was like, well, everybody knew they had an extra 45 seconds. All right, score, TV timeout. I can go to the
Yeah.
bathroom. I can get a drink. Heck, I can maybe even make a quick sandwich and still be back here in time before they go back to 1st and 10. But I mean, Carter, 50-50 at best.
Yeah, so me and Casey have this belief that we talk about on here all the time that and you gotta tell me what you think about this. I'll take these numbers down here while we talk about this. But so the Browns seem to be invested in this idea that they need to bring in a kick returner, a special teams ace every year that makes the roster that just does special teams or just returns kicks. And I could even get behind like the special teams ace that's like your sixth corner or whatever, right? That they've done a couple times, and they have one this year too. As I'm looking at the roster, I
Tony
forget who it
Jones.
is.
Tony Jones.
Yeah, yeah. So, but the return guy, do we really need a designated return guy on the 53? Like, can't you? I mean, don't you have enough guys that or and there's plenty of guys that can return at least it feels like to me at this day and age in the NFL with where the kickoff is at and the limited impact it has on on the team, you should be able to get somebody on the 53 that does something else to return kicks. Like you shouldn't have to designate one roster spot for kick returns. I think that's silly.
They already have a decent kick returner, Jerome Ford.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
you drafted Judkins and you drafted Dylan Sampson,
Yeah.
why can't you say, well, you know what? We're deep enough now in the backfield that we can have
100%.
Jerome Ford go ahead and do that. And because I agree with what you're saying, you know what I'm saying? You have to limit, you have to acknowledge kicker, you have to acknowledge long snapper, you have to acknowledge punter. So that takes you from 53 to 50. And we're not even talking about what you're dressing on game day. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? Because on game day, 7 of those guys are off that roster anyway. So there, now you're going to commit to obviously a cover guy, a special teams guy. You're going to commit to a returner. That's 5. And the thing is, Brad, all of these guys are going to be on your game day roster.
Yeah.
And my other point there would be is, what does it matter? Then why do you have somebody who league wise is regarded as a really good special teams coach, and it's not really gone that well last year, at least, and maybe a little in 23, and Bubba Ventrone
Yeah.
isn't, DeAnthony Bell was a great special teams player for them. He was an undrafted free agent. You know what I'm saying? And he worked his way into being a good special teamer who found, for me, specialists, I think they should be, bottom of the roster guys who found that role to hopefully develop more into it. DeAndre Carter is not going to confuse anybody for Josh Cribbs or Devin Hester. Let's be serious.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And there's kind of been a curse, as they noted in the chat, around that position.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, with the injuries with the Browns. But, certainly I agree. I think the more that you get guys to earn your depth players that are really actually can play safety, play corner, contribute at running back, that earn those spots, the better off you are than having to bring in, core special teams aces and returners. The better, I think, the better off your roster will be.
Also, it's a player development thing. Like you're going to cut
Absolutely.
a 6th corner just because Tony Jones is better on special teams right now. Well,
Absolutely.
I'd rather gamble with a 21-year-old kid just trying to find his way, as opposed to, sure, I might kick off a lot. But I mean, the other thing is we're talking about kickoff return not meaning that much. So the fact that Tony Jones contributes there doesn't make much sense to me. And the other thing is, oh, he's a really good gunner. Well, if I got to punt 7 times, it doesn't matter if I have a great gunner.
Yeah.
I'm getting it done. I need a great gunner.
It's absolutely right. It's absolutely right. So true. All right, so the Browns are in phase 2, Jeff, and this so I do this every year. Let me get this out of here. So the off season, they're in phase 2 now. So of the off season, and phase 1 was 2 weeks long, limited strength conditioning, dead ball. Only strength and conditioning coaches allowed on the field. 90-minute max on the field. Clubs can specify 2 hours for players to be at the facility. They can choose another 2 hours for weights. That's it. That's the first 2 weeks. They're through that already, right?
Mhm.
So they're in phase 2, 3 weeks long. Same rules apply, except coaches allowed on the field now, as you saw Stefanski out there and everybody else. Individual and quote unquote perfect play drills allowed. No offense versus defense. No one-on-one. No helmets. So that's where we're at, right? And it
Glorified
just
walkthrough.
yeah, glorified walkthroughs, but you're getting out on the grass with your guys, and you can get some concepts, you're working on, and at least they were out there having fun, doing some sprinting races, all kinds of stuff, right? Rookie mini camp starts tomorrow, Jeff, through the weekend. There'll be some veterans there, I'm sure, right? A couple second year guys, maybe. I don't know the rules on that. Maybe you can elaborate on that for a minute. But the OTA off-season workout days are May 27th, 28th, 30th, June 3rd, 4th, 6th, 16th through 19th, and mandatory minicamp is June 10th through 12th. So what they have mandatory minicamp and then more OTAs afterwards? That's super weird. That's not usually like that, is it?
Yeah, well, you usually get like that, like 3 weeks. It's like, I think it ends up like 27, 28 days, and it's always the coaches with the, "Hey, nobody screw up, and we'll
Yeah.
see you all around July 20th."
Yeah.
Nobody screw up. No, what I'm saying? This is your last month. But this is kind of also like the check-in, the guys who are recovering from injuries, where are you at in your rehab? Okay, and the other thing. So I'm sure that's critical for a guy like Mike Hall. There's other guys who certainly fall into that, guys who had, off-season surgeries. There's also the, hey, you want to see where DeJuan Jones is at. You know what I'm saying? There's concerns here with
Yes.
some of these guys, bigger guys, weight, even some of the smaller guys, there's target weight where you're supposed to be. They don't want you under it, so it's the check-in thing. And, for a lot of these guys, you miss the camaraderie of it. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of these guys, go back to where they're from, go spend times with their families. And then you come back in and you see the fun. I mean, you see Wyatt Teller there throwing it, basically throwing together, a crawfish, and he's doing what do they call them, the steam pots or whatever, with the corn and the seafood and
Yeah.
all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just, kind of getting back into the groove with your guys, because it does get missed. You know what I'm saying? Being part of a team, and, look, everybody's got, individual lives and interests outside of the game. But you kind of see, just once they're all back together, you find the younger version of yourself. You know what I'm saying? You get back into it, and, you realize, why you play this game, how much fun it is, how much it means to you.
These are some of the pictures from Tuesday. There's Deontay in there
Hmm.
working, right? Good to see. Um, I'm gonna do this exercise just because Will wants me to do it, and he says, who better to do it with than former wide
Love
receiver
Will Larrick.
himself, Mister
Love Will
Mister
Larrick.
Jeff Lloyd. So, uh, comparing this season's wide receiver room to last season's, where it currently stands, and I don't think it's necessarily final. Do you? You think
No.
this is it?
I think this is a kick to tires all day long. Every time a
Okay.
name comes up, the Browns should have some. I mean, I know Gabe Davis doesn't give anybody, a lot of
Yeah.
strength,
Yeah.
but you figure Gabe Davis has already made. He's getting paid over $10 million already from the Jacksonville Jaguars this year, and just like the Deontay Johnson approach, yeah, why would not? And anybody, no, no, no. Really look at this wide receiver room, and you tell me Gabe Davis isn't worthy of being in this wide receiver room. Um, but where it is, I think you start with, and this is going to be the case again, because, everybody, 2023, they ended up starting what I think was 5 quarterbacks, started 5 quarterbacks in
You good?
2024. Let's be honest, it could be 3, could be 4 here again in 2025. But
Yeah.
and you want to see how Jerry Judy, can he maintain this? And you hate it for him, honestly. The guy, it's a good thing that he got here and he got extended because basically telling, David Njoku and Jerry Judy, hey, it could be a quarterback by the week, it could be a quarterback by the month, be ready, boys. Make sure you're getting reps with all of them because you're most likely going to get to see all of them. I think for me, probably the biggest thing when there's probably one's minor, one's definitely major. Cedric Tillman last year, and you go to that prime Cedric Tillman run, and I think it was October 20th. I want to say to November 3rd. It was a 3-game stretch, and he averaged 6 receptions, 75 yards, and a touchdown in those 3 games.
With
If
Jameis.
that's no, yes, but if that's what Cedric can be, and even if it's a little less than that, you've got a pretty decent piece. You know what I'm saying? That's
Yes.
that works.
Yes.
And then the minor one, of course, is Deontay Johnson.
Yeah.
Talking about a guy last year, I think he had 3 touchdowns with Carolina before they just decided to kind of move on from him. Part of it was Deontay. Part of it was he was blocking some guys in
Younger
who were
players. Yeah.
younger. And at the time, Carolina knew they weren't contending. So what was really the point of it? But does he just bite his tongue and does he just want to play ball? You know what I'm saying? Because as we all suspected, the deal was basically no money and 0 guarantees. So it's all on Deontay whether or not And even still, he plays well. And he plays well, contributes. You get closer and closer to that Halloween date of the trade deadline. Hey, you put Deontay on the market. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Hey, I'll take a day 3 pick for Deontay Johnson if somebody else would have some interest in him. Um, then you get to where's the health of David Bell? Because David Bell, look, wasn't killing it, but was contributing before that disgusting hip injury.
Yeah.
Jamari Thrash, looked another, we get those, Mr. Berea, the guys who look good in summer, and unfortunately it never really, and maybe he as a rookie was a guy who probably really suffered from the quarterback shuffle. You know what I'm saying? Because it can't be easy, as a rookie, and every time you're turning around. And I know I said these same things, and actually I did say same things about Cedric Tillman in 2023. It's not easy as a rookie, and every time you're going out there, and you saw it when Joe went out there, because when Flacco went out there in 2023, Tillman was used to playing with quarterbacks who did not have Joe's arm strength.
Yeah.
And Joe was throwing missiles, and Cedric wasn't to his spot yet. And you saw Joe like, well, that's it, man. Ain't throwing your way no more. And so it kind of happened to Tillman there, but certainly, picked up the pace a little bit last year. And then you get, to the bottom of it, the Mike Woodses of it, and where's it all at? But no, the Browns will be looking, and I'll be honest, if it doesn't go well, you would not be surprised, that Cleveland, and this is one thing that helps at being 3-14. When you get to that final cut down, the Browns are going to have second opportunity at anybody that is cut. And Tennessee has a pretty nice, I don't want to say a great wide receiver room, but their wide receiver room probably looks like they have their 6 most likely between everybody that's there. So that means any wide receiver that gets released, Cleveland's going to have a prime opportunity to obviously jump on.
Yeah, you got to think they'll be scouring cut down if there's not,
If they don't address it before. Yep.
Yeah, a veteran that shakes loose, which is very, I mean, is gonna happen. We're seeing guys get shaken loose today around the NFL, not wide receivers, but just players in general. So, yeah, so I mean, they'll be eyeing that. But to Will's point, yeah, I mean, you're right. Cedric Tillman flashed exactly what you wanted to see from him, and he was really coming into his own. And then the concussion just it just gives you the hesitancy of like, boy, from going like, I can count on this guy as my ex, you know what I mean? To I'm just not, I haven't seen a big enough sample size yet, but I like to think he can do it. Like I'm leaning towards thinking he can be that guy. And I don't see them necessarily trying to take that role for. I think they want him to just grow right into that, step right into that role. I think they'll probably try to breed the confidence there with him. I don't think they'll test that. But wide receiver 3, whether that's Deontay Johnson or Jamari Thrash or someone else, or you mentioned, Bell, David Bell, who started off great last year, and then got hurt. It's it's a toss up at this point because Thresh really got a ton of opportunities at the end of last season and didn't do much with them.
Agreed.
To be frank, now you'd hope that he takes a step forward there, but there's not a ton there that to hang your hat on, Jeff. After Tillman, Judy, and hope, let's hope Johnson can make an impact, right? So, compared to last year, how do you compare that to what they had last year going into the season, which was really
Well, I
just
mean,
Amari Cooper, right?
well, it was Amari Cooper and Jerry Judy, and what they thought was going to be Elijah Moore, and
Yes.
well, and first, real quick, Elijah Moore's got to stop blaming people. Start putting some blame on yourself, bro.
Yeah.
Elijah Moore was with the Jets his second year, 1,100 yards for Garrett Wilson. 2023, Amari Cooper had 1,289. Last year, Jerry Judy had 1,209. Other people have found ways to
To
navigate their
get
way
it
to
done.
production in these same difficult situations. Um, so you say Tillman now goes in for, and let's be honest, if you're comparing it straight up to what they did,
Yeah.
Amari wasn't doing so much,
No.
obviously. I think we all thought the hope was going to be a little bit higher for Amari. I'd say, on paper, it's probably less because you can't say Tillman is at where, Cooper was, certainly. It's probably certainly unfair. If Deontay Johnson can just be Deontay Johnson, I think you get the same type of return or maybe even a better return than what, Elijah Moore was giving you.
Yeah,
Prime
that would be
Deontay
great.
Johnson was once a second team all pro. I mean, that's a fact.
Great, great
So I would say,
separation.
yep.
Yeah.
I would say
Yes.
last year's was probably on paper going into it a little better. One thing that we would be remiss not to mention here though is, you know, where does 12 personnel figure into this here in
Sure.
2025? You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
All the wide receivers and anybody who joined us for the draft show, I mean, every time the Browns were on the clock, we talked about certain positions and we talked about, well, which wide receiver would be an interesting fit here if they went wide receiver. Certainly, we discussed names when they made the selection of Harold Fannin at 67. But you got to think 12 personnel plays into this here and certainly could affect wide receiver reps. Tight ends, it's a little slower, to find your way and find your success in the NFL, of course. And for Fannin just being a baby at only 20 years old, it could be the case. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely room for somebody else here. And the reason I bring up Gabe Davis is just, you think if you want to go back to what this offense was during the good years of the Kevin Stefanski offense. Obviously, it was the wide zone, which led to play action. And, when Baker was good in this system, it led to some long balls off of play action. You
Oh
saw it
yeah.
with Flacco in 2023. That's one place where Gabe Davis has always been successful. The problem with Gabe Davis is he doesn't hit singles. He's like in a baseball lineup, he's a number 7 hitter. He's going to hit like 209, but he's going to hit like 10, 12 bombs. And,
Yes.
that's why I kind of like the idea with Gabe Davis, but failed physical now they're trying to come out with, I don't know what that does or how that affects it, but that would be a name for me. It would be interesting. But it's
Yeah.
not that I don't think Tillman couldn't fit in there as well, though. Tillman was what we saw Tillman be successful with, was the vertical stuff and getting down the field. And that's kind of where Cedric succeeded. Not really a great short game guy either, but Judy was good in that role.
Oh yeah.
Njoku is good in that role. You think Fannin can contribute in that role. If Deontay Johnson, again, head on straight, could contribute in that role. Plus, you have running backs in Ford, Judkins, and Sampson who can all kind of help you in that. But again, no, I mean, I am not comfortable, certainly with the state of this wide receiver room the way it is. But again, we spent since January all the way up through the draft telling you there was probably no solution for every positional need the Browns had.
Yeah. I did the trade piece for at the over at the OBR, and as Will brings up, isn't Alec Pierce essentially a younger version of Gabe Davis? Would you rather take a swing on him? if you had to pick one, Jeff.
Well, the only thing is, where is Alec Pierce right now? Because, I'm trying to think if it's, now you're getting to the point where, we're talking bringing him in and evaluating whether or not we're extending him. Gabe Davis, this would
Oh,
be,
absolutely. You would have to, yeah.
yeah, I mean, so you're going sight unseen and you're starting anew here. And are you going to be, fair, you know, as far as, what you're going to get of him? Because, if Pierce comes in here, it most likely would be to push Tillman, and compete with Tillman.
Yeah,
That's certainly a possibility. But I mean, yes, it makes the room overall better. And let's
yeah,
not rule out certainly that there is certainly a relationship between Alec Pierce and Joe Flacco as well. You
yeah,
know, so that's certainly that could something that could help, for them. But no, again, like I mean, look, if they're decent and they're somewhat available, you're the Cleveland Browns have to have somewhat of an interest. But again, cost versus player and that type of thing. Also, you would think, with it being a barren wide receiver class in 2025, you think 26 would be better. And maybe
yeah,
you do want to evaluate Thrash. If Deontay does, again, it does keep his head on, he's a guy that's going to be out there 60 to
yeah.
65% of the time. He's a legit NFL wide receiver.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
again,
he can be, to your point, he can be Elijah Moore and more,
well, yeah, because we were
potentially.
talking about this, I think it was with Jack Duffin. I mean, you could literally have Davis and you could have Deontay Johnson for cheaper than basically what the Bills gave Elijah Moore. Would
Right.
you rather have those two over the for the same or lesser money than Elijah Moore? Obviously, you'd want
Y
him, right?
yeah, it's tough, because, Elijah provided a safe floor, and he did have a kind of, proof of concept with Flacco, would be my only pushback on why I wanted Elijah back. Not for the money that he got, um, but if you could have gotten him back at that UDFA tender they offered him, then I would have been fine with that, because I feel
Yeah.
like it secures the floor of your wide receiver room. Because right now, like, the floor of what they have there is it's just kind of, it's wobbly, right? There's nothing firm there, and I feel like Elijah provide at least. I mean, he got 600 yards a season while he was here. It's not like he was terrible. Made some big plays. He played his best games with Flacco, as has David Njoku. So, we'll see what happens. But, yeah, that floor is unknown right now, and that's a little scary. The other thing for me, Jeff, that I continue to pound the table about, missing in this wide receiver room, for to Will's conversation point here, is just a burner, just a speed threat that will stress defenses vertically and horizontally. They just don't have that guy, with three rockets up his ass, that changes the way you have to cover the Browns.
To be fair, at one time they did have one, and that thing never really worked out.
Sure.
With
Yeah, I don't
an
want anything to
Olympic
do with
sp
that. I
yeah, no,
want
but,
somebody that can catch the football. Yeah,
yeah,
obviously.
exactly. Look,
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen that Jerry Jeudy can get vertical. We've seen that Jerry Jeudy can, blow the top off of a defense. You'd like more than one. You would like more than one of those guys, certainly. Um, and, but again, it's not easy to find those guys. You know what I'm saying? They had one of the fastest wide receivers in the NFL in Anthony Schwartz, and they just couldn't get the rest of it. And we made a couple of cracks
Wide
during the
receiver
draft. There
being
was one that the
generous.
Jets drafted, the kid out of Georgia, I think his name, kid out of Georgia. And the thing was, yeah, he could blow the top off of the defense, but his eyesight was, he was either blind or wearing broken glasses because he could barely catch half the balls that were thrown to him.
Sure.
I think you have that in Judy, but yes, I would say when you get to the rest of the room, you're not going to fool anybody. You're not putting together a 4x400 relay team here of anybody, in the Cleveland Browns wide receiver room.
Yeah, no, I just want, I'm not saying, like, because Judy's a better, he's your one right now. Is he
Hmm.
a one in the NFL? I don't know.
Well,
He's
I
a
mean,
high end,
top 32. I mean,
he's
because
a
you got to
high
say
end
top
two.
32.
right? He's a high end 2, maybe a 1. For us, he's a 1 right now. You hope that Tillman grows into that more and more with every year, because I do think his ceiling is there, to be a pretty elite guy. But I know you guys have said they've had those they can't catch. I'm not advocating for somebody else that can't catch. I
Of
just
course.
think that, when you put Judy on the field on one side and you put somebody else on the field that at least threatens you speed wise downfield, it changes the way defenses have to cover you. And they just haven't had that. And anybody that they have had, to your guys' point, MC, and your point, Jeff, hasn't been able to catch. It hasn't been a real threat. So um, I
Well,
will
your
continue to
point is
advocate
your
for
point
more
is
speed. Yeah,
you want the ability for the offense to come out and they say, well, we can't double team Jerry Judy because we can't single cover him because he runs a 4.29. There's nothing
exactly.
wrong with that. Absolutely not. Of course not.
Exactly.
And
Um,
that's something, ideally I'm sure that they would, like to have that possibility. And that's the thing with Moore. Elijah Moore was a 4.33 guy. Did he
he didn't play
necessarily
like it.
play like a
He
4.33
didn't.
guy?
No.
He did. No. And part of that was their own problem because in 2023, I kind of say I've always said that Kevin Stefanski was kind of Percy Harveying Elijah Moore,
Yeah, he
making it more
miscast
of
him.
making it more of like this gadget that, and again, 4.33, and I think Percy Harvin probably ran the same speed, very close to it. But
Yeah.
all those things looked a hell of a lot different when Percy Harvin were doing them,
Percy did
as
it.
opposed to
Yeah.
when they were trying to do them with Elijah Moore. Then they
Yeah.
started, later in 23, just trying to have him do wide receiver stuff, which certainly looked better and you more kind of produced better in that role. That is it's certainly a need. I don't think you're going to get that guy
This
between
offseason.
no, for what's left of, 2025. No, but I mean, if you're really looking for that type of guy, certainly somewhere in 2026. That's why everybody's so quick to say, "Oh, it'll be a quarterback and a left tackle."
Yeah.
I think quarterback I'll agree with, but I think that second first round pick could be pretty wide open in 2026.
Yeah. Yeah, he was miscast. And then, for more again, you know, good route runner, but he's an outside receiver and a slot's body, right? So it's tough. And so I don't mind so much that he's gone, with bringing in Deontay now. Certainly at them paying him more. I don't know exactly what they gave him yet. I don't even think it's been disclosed, but he can make up to 5 with whatever
You talk
in
about more,
Buffalo.
more.
Yeah.
I think it was. It was like
It's
the guaranteed money was essentially the same guaranteed money on the whatever the Browns thing was.
yeah,
But
but up
obviously
to 5 million.
yeah,
Yeah.
but the allure for more was Josh Allen. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? I know who the
Different team,
well,
new
no, I'm
start.
getting the same quarterback for most likely for 17, probably
Yeah.
20 weeks. That was the allure for Elijah Moore. But I'm going to be, Elijah Moore is going to a team where Khalil Shakir is a better version of Elijah Moore. I'm
Yeah.
sure they have higher hopes for Keon Coleman. And again, Elijah and the Browns have gone through this in years in the past. Jarvis Landry, when the
Yeah.
contract was first done. And this is always, and I talk about this all the time, it's such a difficult thing. Like when you now have had a relationship with a guy for a few seasons, and now it comes to the point where, we're talking about extending the relationship, and, you don't want to insult the guy that's been with you for a couple of years and say, well, here's what we're thinking money wise. You don't want to insult him because he's been good
Yeah.
to you. And that's how you get to this. Well, why don't you go out and test the market and we'll
Yep.
see where we're at? Jarvis Landry, they were right.
Yep.
Obviously, that was it for Jarvis pretty much. He had a stint or two in the NFL, but that was it for Jarvis.
They
This was
usually
and
are
the
right
thing.
when they do
Yep.
that.
This was the same thing with Nick too.
Yeah.
Like, hey, we have no idea what you're worth right now. We don't know. And that's why we're sitting here May 8th and Nick Chubb is still a free agent. And that's kind of what they did with Elijah. And you got to realize that once you get we get that first Monday in March or whenever it is when all of this kicks off, if you're not retaining your own guys within the first or second day, obviously it might not happen. You know what I'm saying? Because
Yeah.
you know better about them than anybody else does.
Yeah.
So if you're not the
Yeah.
one to just go out and get it done, obviously it goes that way. But I mean, Moore got into himself into a situation where, he's going to a better team with a better quarterback. And, But I mean, now I'm just rubbed the wrong way though, because with Moore's comments as he was going to Buffalo, for me, for once, somebody just put some onus on yourself, man.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear that. It's been tough, and no, man. Whatever. It's not easy. It's the NFL.
No, I agree. Yeah. That was unfortunate, the way, because he's a guy that, eats, sleeps, breathes, foot. I mean, you can't question his work ethic. I mean, he
Sure,
is in
and he's always
on it
healthy.
all the
Always
way.
healthy too for a smaller player. Always healthy.
Yeah. So I wish it would have ended better with him. I wish he would have reached a bigger, portion of the um, offense. You know what I mean, or contributed more than his
Hmm.
600 to 500 yards he got every year and whatever, and made a bigger impact. But at the same time, it's funny. We watched the Jets highlights, and I posted when we traded for him, Jeff, online a highlight package of him as a rookie with the Jets. It looks great. It looks so good that, and then I saw my retweet from years ago get posted by Buffalo Bills fans commenting, right? And I'm like, listen, Elijah's a hard worker. He loves ball. He's a good route runner. He's not nearly as good after the catch as you think he's gonna be, as he looks like he should be. He looks
You would think
shifty,
100%.
but he's not. A swift wind knocks him right over. And, he's not as good after the catch as you think. And he's not going to be able to contribute in the slot as well as you would like him to. He's actually better on the outside, which makes it a little difficult for offenses at times, right? So,
He's a wide receiver tweener. Like his
yes,
game transcends more to somebody that should play on the outside. But you
exactly.
look at his build, and I'm not
No,
saying, hey, you threw him
exactly.
in the Rams offense, he'd probably catch 85, 90 passes.
Yeah.
He's just, for what Cleveland does, and they've been trending towards bigger wide receivers.
Oh, yeah.
And, the last couple of seasons, it's okay. I mean, not every move works out, but at the time, you had Coop, you had Moore, you put it a stock in Tillman. You thought you had something that was building.
Yeah.
Look, not every move works out. It just doesn't.
Of course. All right, we're going to be doing. You're watching the OBR streaming network with this awesome crossover with Jeff Lloyd, Browns 3D, which you see every day here on the OBR streaming network at 6 p.m. And All Eyes in Cleveland here, Thursday night show. The schedule release will come out next Wednesday. We'll have a special
Mhm.
show at 8 p.m. Brown's second hardest schedule. Now, I want to
What just
preface.
happened?
I
It's happening, right?
I,
They're up
wa-
there with like the Eagles.
I want to preface this with like, okay, we always say we look at this right, like strength of schedule. To me, I always kind of balk at when I see it before the season because what does it really mean? It's based on last year, and a lot of that in the parity in the NFL makes it at the end of the year, it's often not even close to. Like there's a couple years the Browns have had hardest schedule going in, and then they played like 4 or 5 backup quarterbacks, and it
Mhm.
ends up being a lot lighter than you expected. Last year, not the case. It was. I actually looked at it before tonight's show at Sharp Analytics, Sharp
Warren Sharp.
Football.
Yep.
Yeah, Warren Sharp. It was preseason 31st schedule, so second most difficult going into 24 last year, and ended the season at exactly that, the second hardest schedule. And they start the 25 season with the second hardest schedule. You can't
Well,
make this up.
you play the NFC North. So right off the bat,
Yes.
that is Detroit, that is Minnesota. Two were playoff teams. Green Bay, fringe certainly. And a Bears team that should be improved. The AFC East,
Yeah.
which I don't know how you weigh that, obviously, but Buffalo we know is good, but Miami fell short. Of course, the Jets and of course New England fell short, but all of those teams, well, I think New England and maybe the Jets should be improved. We'll see on Miami, of course. And also you got the 49ers.
Yeah.
Not necessarily that they were a playoff team last year, but a good, normally pretty
Always.
sound football team. And, so I mean, we always think that just because, you finished fourth or you finished 3-14, automatically but I think a lot of it has to do with those two divisions that you draw, which end up making eight out of your 17 games, besides, the six conference games you play.
Yeah.
And then you
So
add
there.
in the three last place teams in the AFC that they'll play.
Yeah, absolutely. So somehow they end up with the third hardest schedule projection wise, or based off of Las Vegas odds, I think is how they do it, right? Win total that are in Vegas right now. The Browns are at, I want to say 4.5. And they have the worst odds in the NFL currently, Jeff, to win the Super Bowl, which is kind of hard to fathom. I don't think they're nearly that bad. There's a lot of teams ahead of them that I would not put at higher odds at this point, but that's where Vegas has
Oh,
them.
I'm just
Um,
curious, who would you say should be lower?
let's take a look here. Let me bring up the odds. I was gonna look.
Because I
Well,
think
I
a
mean,
lot of
right
this
off,
because I think a lot of
right?
this comes down to quarterbacks. You
Yeah.
know what I'm
Well,
saying?
yo,
And
yeah,
like the Browns, obviously we know there's four guys. That's what we know. But I mean, the questions at the quarterback position for Cleveland are obviously pretty large
that's
after that.
that's fair. So if you look at them right now, they are dead last. I guess it's changed since I looked at it. They are no longer dead last. I take it back. The New Orleans Saints are now dead last.
Okay.
At plus 25,000 is one of the teams I was going to name. I was going to name the Jets. I was going to name the Giants. I don't know about the Titans,
They're
but
lower than the Browns?
they are both lower than the Browns now,
Wow.
and the Titans are tied with the Browns. Now you get a big jump in odds, strangely enough, up to Carolina, Las Vegas, Jacksonville, and I'm not so sold on those three. So,
Yeah. Yeah, no,
but
Jacksonville's gonna be interesting, obviously,
very
what Hunter can do for them because now somebody's got him. So let's go see what the full Travis Hunter effect is going to be for, the team that has him. The Raiders, I mean, yeah, Geno, but I mean, it just seems like they tried to recreate, like Seattle, but a little more in from, the far upper West
sure,
Coast.
yeah,
But okay. I mean, as far as I'm actually surprised, maybe that, I mean, the Giants have Russell Wilson, you drafted Dart. Obviously, you got Carter. You had one of the best rookie wide receivers there were. So, I mean, obviously for the Browns fans, that should make you feel good, because, I would say I think the Giants should be favored higher than Cleveland. But for Browns fans, yeah, I mean, I hopefully that, gives you some positivity.
Will asking if the Colts are better on paper than the Browns. I don't. I don't. I don't think so. Um, they have a better wide receiver core and running back at the moment, but they have a quarterback competition that I'm not like jealous of, really.
I was about to say, and even competition, like,
Yeah, right. I mean, what's going to happen there? Daniel Jones, Anthony Richardson. Um, so just looking at the quarterback room, I don't know, and they never do a ton in free agency. They just kind of status quo. It's a lot about keeping their own guys and
mhm.
stuff. They have real solid players on defense, but it's never like anything dominant really, and they're always real sound. Um, I think the Browns have a higher variance, is how I would put it, Will, than the Colts. I think the Colts are I can kind of peg down what they are, maybe, unless Anthony Richardson suddenly turned it around and became amazing over this offseason. But I think the Browns have a higher win loss variance than them. What do you think, Jeff?
I think I would, and again, this probably comes down to, does the offensive line come back healthy? And see, the thing is everybody just thinks, oh, well, if they all come back healthy, well, yeah, but I mean, Jack Conklin's a year older. Wyatt Teller's a year older, Ethan Posic's a year older, Joel's a year older. So even if they all come back healthy, where are they though? Are you a couple percentage points lower than what you normally are? Certainly variables as well, for the Browns. But if you told me the Browns and the Colts were, playing week one, I could certainly see, and it was in Cleveland. Yeah, I'd say, Cleveland favored by 5 would probably
Yeah.
be fair and be accurate. And,
Yeah.
you factor into that, hey, if Joe was the quarterback, certainly Joe would know the opponent very well, just coming from there as well. So, and of course, the Browns have, the best defensive player in the whole of the entire league.
This makes for a great transition and a good way to kind of put a bow on this show here, Jeff. I want to talk a little bit about expectations because I went on Quincy's show and I don't think he's released the segments yet. But, in a lot of our Things I Think I Know episodes on Fridays this year, we got into some heated debates at points throughout
We
the
do not
off
here at the
season.
OBR. We debate
Yeah.
well here at the OBR.
We do. And so we got into some heated debates. At one point, it felt like, and I took a lot of hate for this, but the Browns had Pickett, and it felt like they were trending towards uh, Carson Wentz at the time. And I was irate because I'm not a fan of either guy. And
There's very few quarterbacks that were available that Brad would have been interested in this offseason. Let's be honest.
facts, yeah. But I was kind of like, whatever their plan was going into this offseason, it looks like crap to me right now. And he was like, it's incomplete. It's incomplete. And a lot of what he was pointing to was at the time was Cousins, which is not what happened. So we kind of revisited that conversation. We revisited AB. We kind of laid out together that Andrew Berry, this was going to be a as critical as an offseason as you could ever have. This was when the Miles thing was just starting. Like, hey,
Mhm.
you got to handle the Miles Garrett thing because that's the domino that crushes the Browns' financial system they have in place, right? If you have to trade him, so how does he handle that? How does he handle the second pick in the draft? Don't fall into the quarterback trap here. All this stuff. And I think he handled that really well. As far as the offseason, Miles balked. He got Miles, he called his bluff basically. He signed, he's here. He didn't take quarterback at 2. He actually fleeced kind of what it looks like, at least in draft value, uh, the Jacksonville Jaguars at 2. And we'll see how the draft picks turn out. I have my beefs with certain ones, but they're all look like good players. It looks like 2, 3, 4, 5 even guys could start and contribute this year from the class. So that would be a terrific win. But going back to the quarterback room and looking at it where we're at now, where you've got 2 rookies, you brought in Flacco since then. What are your expectations, Jeff? What are your expectations for this team? Now, it's not complete. I think you need a safety from somewhere,
Sure.
a veteran. I think you need receiver help if you can get it. They'll be a part of tertiary. They have some money left. They'll be a part of tertiary free agency if they can add a guy here or there. Biggest one for me is safety, free safety. I think you
I
got to
don't yeah,
challenge our guy there from Ohio State,
Ronnie Hickman.
um, Ronnie Hickman.
Yep,
Escaping
the Jersey
name
boy.
escape.
I don't disagree. And there's certainly some guys on the market right now. I
Yeah,
think Blackman is a popular name, former Colt. And you wonder if it's money willing to be spent as opposed to money player is looking to get. I know a lot of people want to bring up Justin Simmons. you know, let's be honest. I mean, if you're Justin Simmons, your list is probably 4 or 5 teams, and it's probably the Philadelphia Eagles. It's probably the Buffalo Bills. Hey, if the Chiefs gave me a call,
yeah,
why not at this point go ring chasing? Of course, and even still, Justin Simmons did this last year, went to Atlanta. Didn't work out, obviously.
sure.
Didn't get to play, in January like he was hoping to. Um, Not a lot out there, certainly. And if you guys didn't catch it Tuesday night, Garage Beers, Mike Heath, they had on Donovan McMillan from Pitt.
Like
And
that
look,
kid.
two-time All ACC player. I think it was over 100 tackles both seasons at Pitt.
Yeah.
Ran in the 4.4s. We know, and this could be something you look at with the Browns. And
Yeah.
because look, they've already paid 2 free agent safeties in their time here with this regime. Neither one of them worked out. John Johnson
No.
III, I know everybody likes to beat him up. The Browns brought him in and wanted to make him a free safety. John Johnson III was never a true free safety. He was a combo coverage safety that the Browns asked to do something. Juan Thornhill, look, I mean, I'll admit it. I was the one screaming to sign him. I
Me
love the
too.
fact that you brought
Me
in a
too.
guy who had Super Bowl experience. He was everything about Juan Thornhill for me screamed like that was going to be the right one. Obviously, did not work out, of course. So I don't know if you're a free agent veteran this late in the game. It could just be, are you just will the Browns pay me a little bit more and I'll go there for the money, or am I going to do my damnedest and hold out to try to get myself to a team with legit January aspirations? So certainly that's part of it. But the quarterback
Not
room, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna get there's not much out there, let's be honest. There's
There wasn't much out there when it all started.
no. But since then, I think Marcus Williams I'm looking
Yes.
at guys that can play free safety. I'm crossing off the guys that are
And
just
and and
box
Marcus
guys.
Williams isn't a terrible thought because we know the AFC North, like
Right.
it's so weird the way kissing cousins goes on in the AFC North.
Yeah.
So many of these guys end up staying in division, playing, against each other. The Pickett obviously now,
Yeah.
then there was Geno Stones with the Bengals, but was formerly a Raven. And I was a Marcus Williams coming out of Utah. I was a fan.
Yeah.
I was a fan of Marcus Williams coming out of YouTube. And if you're Marcus Williams, does this look like a good place for you to go and say, hey, I want to prove to people maybe I can still play?
Yeah.
Because this would be a place you could do it because, the Browns, certainly have the need. And certainly, it could, that would probably be the guy as opposed to maybe a Blackman who's a little bit younger and a little more established. It just seems like people don't realize that Blackman's a pretty good player. And where as opposed to a guy like Simmons, we all probably can kind of read the tea leaves as to what he is looking for. But yeah,
Yes.
Marcus Williams absolutely kind of looks like and in his prime New Orleans years, he was a guy that could get you turnovers.
Yes. He seems older than he is. He'll be 29 by the time the season comes around. But
1 year, yeah, but again, he fits right into that, 1
yeah.
year, 2.5 to 3 million, nothing's really guaranteed, opportunity to make 4 to 5. That's the type of deal, for a guy like Marcus Williams. And, we'll see.
And you got like Jordan Poyer and Tayshaun Gibson, both almost 35 years old out there.
Yeah,
Um,
those scream guys that are gonna sign somewhere in November is what they scream like.
yeah,
Because at
yeah.
35, you don't know if you can go from, June till January, but maybe you can go from Halloween to January.
Can Rayshawn Jenkins play free safety at all?
I don't think you're gonna say he's a true free safety. You know what I'm saying? He's more of a, it's probably not his true game. I mean, if you want the true on the roof safety out of all these guys we discussed, the only guy that's truly proven that he can do that in his NFL career is Marcus Williams.
Yeah, because these guys are more box guys. Jordan Whitehead, Julian Blackman, Quandre Diggs.
Hmm.
Not going back down the John Johnson route. Von Bell and Ryan Neal. So that's the extent of the safety names on the market. So Browns have 2 first-round picks. They have this quarterback room, which I think is a part of this evaluation I want us to make. We'll tie it up here in the next 10 minutes. But give me your thoughts as they go into this thing, like what your expectations are with Flacco, Pickett, 2 rookies in the room. How do you manage reps with them? And how do you approach the season in a way that I think it's a tough balancing act where I don't think anybody thinks this team's going to win the Super Bowl, but at the same time, you owe it to your veterans to try to win some football games here and try to be competitive. At the same time, next offseason, and maybe the biggest offseason this organization has seen since '99.
Well, and
Um,
even still, next offseason, that would be the heavy lifting, certainly, for Andrew Berry. Because,
yes,
you're going to be looking for that quarterback, and most likely you're going to be revamping, four-fifths, if not an entire offensive line.
right.
But the way and the first thing I'm going to say as far as the quarterback thing goes, I
Yeah,
hear so much talk about one of the rookies going to the practice squad. That absolutely, I'm sorry, it's asinine. You are
yeah,
not going to be able to release Dylan Gabriel or Shador Sanders
no,
and sneak them through waivers. So, anybody who is mentioning that, I'm sorry, guys. That is absolutely preposterous. There's no way you were going to be able to release either one of those guys and sneak them back on your practice squad. It's just not going to happen. Now, as far as managing reps, I think this comes down to, and this is something like, sometimes we don't get told things, but actions tell us the answer we were looking for.
yeah,
But this is where it could be deceiving. You're not going to put a ton of work on Joe Flacco's plate
no,
early. He's 40 and a half years old. You
yeah,
know what Joe is capable of. You already have your concerns about how many games Joe Flacco can actually give you.
yes,
So, you're going to put Joe in and just give him enough work to make sure that he's with it. He knows where everybody's going to be, and I'm sure
yeah,
there's going to be some newness. I'm sure Tommy Reese is going to have an opportunity to put some of his feel into this. You wouldn't have promoted him otherwise.
no,
And that's the work Joe is going to need. How much work Kenny Pickett gets is going to be the interesting one. Because if he gets a good amount of work, maybe it's going to tell you, and I think it was Mary Kay who said this today, where, I think, you know, Joe would be the guy to trade. I don't know, man. Joe is 40 and a half years old. He has got a large family. You know what I'm saying? Joe could have easily just said, I'm not signing with anybody. Call me once the season starts. Let's see who's in a bad spot.
yeah,
And if it's local to where I live, I'll make it work. Like, I don't think Joe wants to be in this big position where he's going to uproot his family. Oh, well, the Rams would like Joe. Well, how's that working for Joe and his family? They all live in South Jersey on the Pennsylvania border. He's got 5 kids. He's going to tell his wife to drive 5 kids out to the West Coast for 4 months.
yeah. I
If
can't see it.
somebody's going to get moved, in my opinion, and of course it's going to be the guy who's not going to win. I think it's easier to move Kenny. Maybe he's
Yeah,
not as desirable on the market.
yeah,
Maybe there would be more interest for Joe, but I think it would be Kenny would be the guy you ideally would try to move because I think there was some favors being done as far as like Joe coming back and signing at this point, saying, well, you guys know the deal. You know what I'm saying? My family's close. And, for Joe's family to come to Cleveland, it's a 5-hour car ride, 6-hour car ride, maybe just straight down the Pennsylvania Turnpike into Ohio and going to Northeast Ohio.
yeah,
So certainly that. Um, but if Kenny gets a significant amount of work, that may tell you, that they want to see and give a legit shot to Kenny,
yeah,
and then you're going to get the kids their work. You're foolish not to. And for me, and this is kind of, and I talked about this, certainly on my show is, look, there isn't an NFL team that doesn't go into week one saying, hey, we think we can be in, we think, because look, just as much as your team can get banged up. And what did you just say before? How many times did Browns go into games and it was like, oh, wow, we're not playing the starting quarterback. Oh, wow, we're
yeah,
not playing. I mean, those things can happen for any team in the NFL. So basically, in my opinion, the way you play it is you play it till about week 5, week 6. Are we 4-2? We're 4-2. We're in it. We're in it. You know what I'm saying? You
for
know,
a long time. The way the NFL is, I mean, you're in it
especially
for a long
especially
time.
the
Yeah,
way those games would have been. We don't know the schedule yet.
yeah,
Obviously, in a week, we could probably tell this story a little bit better.
yeah,
But say the Browns were 4-2 and already had 2 conference wins.
yeah,
We're not only we're really in it.
yeah,
Maybe we're 2-0 in the conference by now. And
yeah,
say one of those wins was on the road. Say you
yeah,
stole Cincinnati already on the road. And let's be honest, the way Pittsburgh looks right now, you know,
yeah,
maybe a split, beat them 2-0, take 2 from them. So you play that the way it is. But I honestly feel you probably, in a perfect world, they would like both Gabriel and Sanders to get some starts.
yes. You
There's
have,
no reason,
yeah,
and yeah, normally you would say, hey, third rounder, fifth rounder, totally different circumstances for both these guys. Because we're
yeah,
talking about a guy 24, played 6 years of college ball. Shador, 23, obviously played a large amount of college football. And whatever your, issues were or your negatives were for Shador, and like we said when he was drafted, only way you're going to know is to draft him. The only way you're going to know is to put the ball in his hands.
Yeah.
Can you play in the NFL or not? It's the only way you're going to find out. But yeah, I mean, if you got to 4-2, you got to 5-2, you can ride that hand. I mean, and if you didn't get to play Gabriel or Sanders as much as you ideally wanted to, that's fine. Your job is to win. You're paid to win.
Yes.
Development comes second. You're paid to win. Nobody cares
Yes.
how you did it. But for me, I know what Joe can do with this offense. And as much as he can give me some highs and he can throw me into a win, he can also throw me into a loss sometimes.
Yeah.
And you see how it goes. And the other thing would be, can Joe play 17 games? I don't know if that's realistic.
I
But
don't think it
and
is.
then you play the hand from there. But I just don't think Joe needs a lot of work, and Joe's not going to play in a preseason game. Nobody's going to ask a 40-and-a-half-year-old guy to play in a preseason game. There's no reason Joe needs to. So the way I would see it is, you figure, Pickett gets a start. Each one of them gets a start. They divvy up the rest of the time between the three of them. Who knows? By that time, maybe they've already in their mind said it's going to be Joe who's going to be the one. So maybe
Mhm.
Kenny gets a lot of game one, kind of showing him off a tad bit. And then the Rooks play the rest of the preseason, to get as much, time and reps, and, ideally you would like them to play not with the lower end of the roster. They're going to have to at times, but you want to see what they look like with the higher end of the roster.
Of course.
Of course, what can you give me? What can you do? I think it's not as hard as people think it is, because I think you're gonna, realize that Joe is just gonna get his work. Joe's gonna be
Yeah.
like the veteran starting pitcher who's gonna come on out, do what he's got to do, and then the next thing you know, he went into the clubhouse. He's on his exercise bike doing whatever.
Yeah, you almost didn't treat the season a little bit like a baseball game, to your point, as analogy
Yeah.
wise, where you're sending. I don't expect Flacco to play 17 games, but if he can go out there and give me a hot 6, like we
Yeah.
talked, if he can go get you 4-2 before his arm falls off, or whatever happens, and then it's about managing, trying to win while learning as much as you can about these two rookies and Pickett, if you want to throw him in there too, 20 somethings. But really, the rookies, it's about, let's find out who they, as much as we can about these two, while trying to win and get better this season. So that, I mean, because what would it take from a rookie to take you off of thinking you're swinging in the first round at another quarterback next year with 2 first-round picks?
Mm. I got obviously early to tell.
A lot,
Certainly,
right?
what's available in the class certainly is going to be able to tell you.
Yeah,
And look, there's some interesting guys. And look, I'll tell you right now, I think the kid from South Carolina is crazy interesting. He's going to be a
yeah,
redshirt sophomore. He's
yeah,
currently 19 years old.
yeah,
So, ideally, I like football. I want everybody to be good. First thing I would say is Lenora Sellers, stay in school.
yeah,
Let's get, so he'll get his 4 in. I, I- I'll be honest, Brad. I don't know if there's anything they can do. Because you wanna know what? Because what my thinking would be is, all right, and unless they went in there and just absolutely Brock Purdy'd it,
yep.
how about we use that? I mean, unless they looked, Brock Purdy.
Well
But
said.
even still then, you wanna know what? Okay, so maybe you trade one of the ones and then go take the impact player, and you know what? We'll revisit the next year or whatever.
Yeah,
Or you say, you wanna know what? You were this good, but I think the kid could be just as good, and you wanna know what? If you guys if it's gonna be a battle, but and look, it could be a battle between the 3 of them, and I think this was the misconception everybody had, when the Andrew Berry said, I envision the room trending younger." And
yep,
everybody was like, "Well, they signed Flacco 3 days afterwards." Well, maybe you didn't ask the appropriate questions.
yeah,
Maybe he didn't mean trending like this week. Maybe he meant trending in the, because like next year it could be 25, 24, 23, or 22 in the room. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yep,
But even if they played really, really well, you take one of them. And guess what? If he looks great, you get that situation years ago where the Falcons, sent Matt Schaub off and got a nice haul for him because, he looked good, but was never good enough to beat out Michael Vick.
yep,
And it all depends certainly where the picks are at as well.
yeah. I think the Purdying it that was well stated for me. I think
That's
that's
yeah.
what you need to
Because
see
it's
if
not
you.
superstar stuff. It's, oh my God, he really fits what
Yeah,
we like to do.
yeah,
Man, he really fits.
yeah. Because it for me that it's going to have to take something like that for me not to want to get aggressive next year and try to solve this thing, depending on who comes out and whatnot and all
Of
that,
course.
you know. But yeah, so it's a difficult dance they're going to have to do this year. The one thing that I didn't account for, one thing that I've changed a little bit mindset wise is I kind of early in the off season I felt Jeff like, boy, they really have to go win 9, 8, 9, 10 games and be playing meaningful football in December to keep their jobs. I don't feel that way anymore. I feel like they're safer than a lot of people think.
I agree with you, but I am going to say it with this. It's, you can't be losing, you know, and say, I'm trying to do the math. So what? 6-11 now is a 17-game season.
Yeah,
But I think everybody just equates physical record as opposed to, all right, well, now let's open it up and look at, you say they went, 2-2 in December or 1-3 in December. But those three losses, they lost by 14, 16, and 19.
yeah,
Well, you want to know what? Keeping it together for 17 games is extremely important.
yeah,
But you tell me December, we lost by a field goal in Baltimore. So who are some of these other tougher teams they got to play? You know, we lost we lost by 6 to Detroit.
yeah,
Or we the AFC, we lost to, say you lose to the Patriots, but you lost by 2, a team on the
mm,
rise.
mm.
That's what's gonna matter. It's gonna be, if you look
The
at the, and last year,
context.
of
Yeah,
course, last year the way they were losing, that can't be the story for a second year in
no,
a row. And I think last year it was okay because, hey, the closer we can get to that number 1 overall pick ain't the worst situation in the world because we got a
right.
disgusting black cloud like we got to get away from. But I
Yeah,
think everybody just feels better about the overall type of guys that are in that locker room now. And that if that was part of the focus, and we all talked about this when we were doing the draft shows, was good player, young, productive, and most importantly, good kid. Well, good kids usually are guys who are going to shoot up and they're going to play 60 minutes each and every Sunday. And it ain't going to matter, that they have 4 wins in December.
yep,
They're going to go out there and give you 60 minutes of football and the best 60 minutes of football they have in them. So yeah, if the product looks like crap, yeah, I'm not gonna lie to you. It could change something
oh, yeah,
because now you got to think, and yes, they've never had this opportunity to truly draft their guy.
yeah,
And, and I said it at the time, if they get the opportunity to chase down their franchise quarterback for a second time, you thank your lucky stars because usually you screw it up the first
you get
time,
one.
you never get a second time.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
for them, the most important thing is going to be what the product looks like each and every week.
yeah,
It may not be wins and losses, but it may be 60 minutes and it was everything you had. And
yeah,
certainly, when it gets to Gabriel or Sanders time or both of them, it's going to come down to, hey, you know, are we seeing that there's, where we're at? Is this going to get better? And then you think, okay, one more impact player wherever on the team, the quarterback, and I think we're finally there. But it's
yeah.
definitely going to be what the product looks like as opposed to what the record actually is.
Yeah, competitive football, what you're getting from, the quarterbacks and your young players, but the culture, I think, is, trending where the culture is trending. Like I heard Alex Wright on an interview at Big
That's
Play.
uh-huh.
He sounded great. Did you hear? He was like exuding this coming off the last year, like washing out of my mouth. We're all in on this new culture that this is who we're going to be. We believe in ourselves. That was an anomaly. And it was great to hear him talk that way. A guy that I hadn't ever heard talk like that before.
Very quiet Alex Wright has always been which is funny because Alex Wright will do a lot of talking with people like ourselves. I know Corey, not our Corey, yeah, Corey Kinnan, not Casey Kinnaman,
Yeah.
had a really good relationship and very
Yeah.
quiet kid. But so you hear that, and especially when it's a quieter guy, and because it sounded like it was kind of coming from inside.
It
It
did.
didn't sound like cue card
It
stock
wasn't
answer type of thing.
superficial. Yeah.
No, it wasn't. And for Alex Wright, it had to be tough certainly last year because first off, and I remember talking years ago, with Joe Schobert about injured guys, and it's the worst thing in the world. And sometimes in a bad year, when the trainer says, "Yeah, I think we'll just shut you down," all right, cool. You know what I'm saying? But like Schobert that year had a really bad, I think it was either calf or a hamstring.
Yeah.
And they were like, "Well, we don't know where you're at." And he was like, "No, absolutely not." He's like, "No."
Yeah.
He's like, "No, no, no. I will be back out there as fast as I possibly can." We're not even entertaining talks of injured reserve. No, and like, hopefully you have a 53 that all kind of carry that type of thing. But Alex is, has always been a guy I liked. I've always been intrigued, because
Yeah.
I like versatile combination players. And,
Right.
that's where Alex Wright, I think, is kind of fun. But yeah, in that conversation, he certainly, made it feel, as much as it probably sucked at times last year, that everybody kind of shut the door. And maybe it does have to do with, getting a real rookie class in here. And all of a sudden, yeah, it does feel a little, a first round pick. Oh,
And,
we got a bones
yeah.
baby in here. You know what I'm saying? Because
Yeah.
always, well, somebody who's bringing the food to the meetings. Well, you were never going to ask the kid who was drafted in the 6th round to bring food to the meetings. The kid's
Yeah.
broke as anybody. He can barely pay his rent.
Yeah.
So
And
definitely, I think it brings some life.
it's not the Deshaun Watson rebuild part 4, right? Like this is different
Yeah,
and you're moving
exactly. Yeah, let's
forward.
set
And I
this up
think
one more
that's
time to try to
refreshing.
make this disastrous
Yeah.
decision we made
Right.
finally work.
Right. So I think moving on from that is refreshing and all that stuff. So great stuff, Jeff. Fantastic conversation, great discourse. Enjoyed having us together tonight in the
Yeah,
cross the
no, and
Browns.
look, I mean, we're here to the off season. Some guys,
Yeah,
some folks here at the OBR are taking some hiatuses. Gives us an opportunity to maybe explore and try some new things, and certainly something we can do. Brad will always talk ball. I'll always talk ball. Pete will always
absolutely.
talk ball. When Casey Kinnaman's not dealing with a natural disaster, he'll talk some ball. But it was actually a good opportunity, for me today because for those who don't know, I got 2 daughters. One's a junior, one's a senior. So I mean, with my senior, I'm going through so much as far as high school ending.
I'm
My
sure.
junior, this happens to be junior prom week. So, there was a million last minute details because her junior prom is tomorrow that we had to work
Oh
out.
yeah.
So by the time Brad had messaged me, I was like, you know what? This actually works out pretty well because there I was sitting outside of a tanning salon before I had to go drop her off at a nail appointment. But hey, look, we're parents and we do what we do here that we absolutely love so much. But we're really, again, what we've started here in January with this, when I came over, and I know Brad's been a big part of the streaming network here. And in order to give it more oomph, we just needed a couple more bodies. Well, we needed
Yep.
draft picks, right? So we did, and I think it's gone over pretty well. I know that what we hear from everybody, they're pretty excited about it, and I know plenty of people that message me and basically come on at 6, and they're here, with the OBR on YouTube or
Till the show's
Twitch.
end. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. They're here for 3, and plenty of guys that got to run in during the back, during Cavs games, during
Yep.
Guardians games, all that type of stuff. And you know, we appreciate, obviously, and we try to do all we can for you. We know you guys turn out for the written content. You know, we get the numbers from Barry every day. So we see obviously that everybody's flocks to the written work, and then from the written work, we can kind of take that and create bigger and better discussions here each and every night on the OBR streaming network.
Absolutely. Perfectly said. And we're going to keep at it for you guys. So we appreciate it. Hit like, hit subscribe. I appreciate you guys. All wonderful comments at the end for you guys
I had
hanging
just
out with
actually
us.
one thing I did want to think about it, and maybe this is something we'll probably do through maybe the OBR, main account is, we'll do a better job of putting it out there. Look, we have shows obviously every night.
Yeah.
Questions, topics, ideas. Hit any of us up because look,
Oh,
if you all come out, obviously the least we could do is try to cater some of the topics, some of the questions, certainly to, what you guys want to hear. And that's where we can get to it. Because I know years ago, Pete and I, we throw out things like 12 personnel. We
Yep.
throw out things like coverage, and there's people sometimes that probably not necessarily know. Don't be afraid. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
we love to talk about that stuff, go a little bit more in depth about that stuff. But even still, just general questions you guys have, or general questions for a topic idea. I mean, by all means, like we're not here without you listening. So
Yeah.
obviously, you guys should, have the opportunity to, have some input on what you would like to hear us talk about as well.
100%. Always open to that. Will dropping a great topic for us tonight, comparing last year's
Of
wide
course,
receiver room to this year. So,
Counselor Will Eric.
well, yeah. Well, fantastic. Appreciate you guys all in the chat. Once again, on your way out, hit like, hit subscribe, tell a friend, get over to the OBR, tune in, and get a part of the best Browns community going on out there. Get over to the OBR.com and read everything we're pushing out over there. It's all fantastic. We appreciate your contribution to the show for this special crossover between Browns 3D, the great Jeff Lloyd, and All Eyes on Cleveland, and myself, Brad Ward. Have a wonderful Thursday evening. We are out.